Hey, what's up? This is Javier with Animals as Leaders.
This is Matt from Animals as Leaders.
This is Tosin from Animals as Leaders, and you're geeking out to Gear Gods.
What's up, Gear Mortals? Trey Xavier here. On today's episode of Rigged, we get to talk to none other than the one and only Animals as Leaders. Check it out.
I'm Javier Reyes of Animals as Leaders. We are in Los Angeles at the Mayan Theater. My rig is essentially Axe 3 going into a Synergy Amps 5050 power amp, going to two separate cabs. One is a 412 with V30s and greenbacks, and another one is a 212 cab with greenbacks in it. As for guitars, I'm using a variety of guitars, mainly my signature LTD JR608, as well as a custom Vintage Plus 8-string Strat. And then I'm playing a Strandberg number 63. It's a custom guitar, it has some additional frets at the end. And 7-string LTD Slimline acoustic guitar.
Can you tell us about what's the deal with the extra frets on the Strandberg?
So on the Strandberg, the extra frets is basically additional 2 frets on the 7th and 8th string. So what normally would be the 0 fret, you have 2 additional frets for just extra gent or whatever. So for my pedal board, what I'm using essentially is the MFC 101 as a general MIDI controller to control the Axe 3. I also have a MXR submachine fuzz octaver that I use for the song Brain Dance. It's kind of ballsy and all sick. For our wireless units, for the guitar wireless units, I'm using Line 6 G70 relays, and then for my ears, I'm using Sennheiser's G4 units.
What's your in-ear company?
I'm using just basic Shure 215s. I find them to be adequate and plentiful around the country when one goes wrong, or bad rather.
That's smart. I didn't consider that. If you have custom ones and they go to shit,
It's like
toast.
it's another $1,000 or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd rather have 10 of the 215s than one pair of molds. Yeah.
What's up, Internet? Tosin Abasi here from Animals as Leaders. We're currently on tour with The Contortionist and Evan Marion and Dana Hawkins right now. I guess you guys want to know about my rig. I've been using a pedal bass setup for a while now, and basically I have a clean single channel head made by Morgan Amps. It's the SW50R, and it's a really immaculately clean amp with a ton of aggression as far as like amp feel, sort of compression and transient attack. So it's really, really awesome for pedals. I don't know how he does it, but you can stick any pedal in front of this thing and it sounds amazing. So I kind of use that as a glorified power amp in a way, even though it's the source of all my clean sounds. You'll hear the actual Morgan and the EQ on the head there. But for distortion, for my rhythm channel, for my rhythm sound, I'm using the Friedman BEOD, which is their brown eye sound. I have 2 of those. So one is my rhythm sound, and the other is a slightly gained down, different EQ'd. It's the same pedal, but I use it for my slap tone. So it's a bit brighter and there's less gain. There's a tight knob on that pedal, which I think is really amazing. It takes the low end and it kind of like reduces the width, and you get this really awesome sort of tight low end for palm muting and thumping and stuff like that. So the Friedmans are taking care of the slap and rhythm, and then for lead, I'm using the Abasi Pathos pedal, which is really smooth distortion sound. I'm a big John Petrucci fan, and I always found that through his Mesas, he was getting this really awesome sort of fluid liquid sound when he would go to the neck pickup, and it would be like this fat lead. And so the Pathos, to me, I set it up to be that sort of feel and sound, and it works out perfectly. And then I'm using another Pathos for sort of mid-gain breakup sounds, like even clean tapped parts that I need to be a little bit louder and a little bit driven. I'm using a Pathos gain down for that. It's a very versatile pedal, which is cool, so I'm getting multiple uses out of that. And then for the wet parts of my signal, I'm using Strymon pedals. I have a timeline for delay, and I have the Big Sky for reverbs. I'm using the Big Sky for 3 sounds. There's like a basic like spring reverb. Then I have a very, very wet, almost synth pad style reverb. It's almost like 100% wet. I use that for Holdsworth like volume swells. And then I have a reverb that's really lush and has a long decay just for like that in-between space if I'm doing clean passages that I need the notes to kind of hang in the air. The timeline has a ton of really great effects, but I'm using it basically just as like a time-based delay on certain sounds, like my lead sound and certain cleans. So I feel like I'm underutilizing that pedal, but it sounds great. Beyond that, I have a boomerang, which is a phrase sampler. It's my favorite phrase sampler. And I use that to loop myself at certain points of the set. I can layer parts. So that's cool. And then I have a NS2 noise suppressor, really basic. And I'm using a Harlow, which is a pedal made by Rupert Neve and Reinhold Bogner, and it's basically a compressor, but it's kind of unique in the sense that I think it really gears towards like guitar amp feel as opposed to just being like a studio outboard compressor. I think it's really appealing to guitarists who want a certain kick out of their amps, and this is kind of like having that on tap. So that could potentially be an always-on pedal. I use it mainly to boost my cleans and to give a little bit of compression to certain tones. All of these pedals are plugged into an octa switch, which is made by Carl Martin, and it basically allows you to take a whole bunch of pedals, leave them always on. They all input into the octa switch, and then you can combine certain combinations of pedal and assign them to certain buttons. So it has 8 assigned, spaces. So this is like having presets, but you're not in a digital modeler situation. So that's how I don't have to tap dance like crazy with the pedal board. It all goes into a loop switcher. I'm pretty sure there's a Carl Martin Plexitone on my board, but I'm not really using that on this tour. It's just there. It's a great pedal. Sounds like a Marshall. Pretty sick. Okay, and then there's a second part of my rig because we're playing some acoustic songs. I'm using nylon string guitars, and so I have a Fishman Aura, which is almost like an IR box, but for acoustic like guitars. So instead of the way cabs are modeled, they modeled actual acoustic guitars, everything from dreadnoughts to concert classicals, and they captured these IRs inside of a box. And so when you plug in something like a thin line acoustic or a semi-acoustic instrument, you can use this IR to kind of give it the dimension of a mic'd big body acoustic. And it's sweet. It has a compressor inside as well and an EQ, and you can blend those signals so you can get the perfect blend of your piezo as well as this sort of like aura of whatever guitar you choose. So that added level of dimension to our acoustic stuff that's really sick. That goes into the Fishman Loud Box, which is just an acoustic amplifier. I use that for stage sound. In between this, I'm using the Axe FX3 as basically a glorified reverb, delay, and EQ, just to get a bit of feel out of the acoustic that I didn't feel like I was getting. So we put the fractal in between there. But that's the only thing I'm using it for, although the Axe FX3 is mind-blowingly amazing. I'm just using it for my acoustic on this tour. And yeah, cab-wise, I'm going to a Friedman 412, and I have a Morgan open back 212 as a side fill. I found that I really like the open back 212 for certain tones. I like the fact that there's bleed out of the back of it, and it breathes a little bit more than like a closed back 412. So a lot of this is just for my benefit on stage. Front of house, you're getting what you're getting. But and then guitar-wise, I'm using Abasi Laradas, which are my designs. They're multi-scale 8 strings. They have Fishman Fluence in them, which are my signature Fluence pickups. And I think for the acoustic stuff, I'm using a Godin like multi-ack. I forget what it's called. It's like the 7-string nylon. That's tuned to step down. I have a Kiesel for one of the songs, and I'm using a Rick tune. I don't think it has a name. It's like it was unearthed from a comet that landed in the middle of the desert, and somehow it had strings and pickups on it, and that's what it is. So yeah, we're rocking Sennheiser wireless packs. I think I have Shure in-ears. I'm really weird with in-ears. I low-key hate them. I think I'm old school. I just like hearing the amp at volume in the room, but we run a click, and I need to be on that click, so I run an ear. I kind of just like barely put it in there. So I can't attest to like the quality of the sound that much because I'm using it as like basically a click track thing. I'm sure Javier goes deeper into that. He's more committed to that whole isolation thing, but yeah. I'm using NYXL Diodario strings, which they're really great. I don't know what secret sauce they have going on, but I find that they're super consistent. They have a great feel. and they decay in a pleasant way. It's not like you lose all your top end the next day or something like that. It's kind of nice. And I'm using an interesting set. They do a 9.5 gauge, which I find for my multi-scale setup, I do like that in between. That 0.5 gives me a little bit of tension. I don't want to commit to 10s, but I don't want it as light as 9s, and it's kind of awesome that they do a 9.5 gauge. And I have a 56 for my 7th string and a 74 for my 8th string. And because of the multi-scale, you kind of don't have to go super thick on the low string. I have it tuned to E, but 72 does well, 74 as well. So, and then picks, I'm using the prime tone, the Dunlop prime tone picks. I really like them. I don't know if I have one on me. They're kind of slightly larger than a Jazz 3, and they have a bit of the bevel feel of like a Red Bear pick or one of those super expensive. So I feel like for sweep picking and a lot of the economy picking stuff, the glide of a beveled edge is really, really nice. And that prime tone material is also, it's a really nice material. So I've been pretty addicted to those. That is basically what I'm using on this tour. And yeah, sounds all sick.
This is Matt Garstka with Animals as Leaders, and I'm playing a Maple Bubinga hybrid kit. It's a Star Classic. It's made in Japan. It's got an outer layer of cordia, and with the maple, I get a lot of warmth and roundness, and with the Bubinga, it adds a lot of depth, a lot of low-end punch, and so the combination for me is the ultimate combination. It's like a rock, heavy, dense kind of thing, and I usually tend to tune my drums lower, so it's the optimal kit for me for what I'm trying to go for, that heaviness, that weightedness. And let's see what else I'm playing. The snare that I'm playing is actually matching the kit. Usually I do a bell brass, a Tama bell brass, but I don't know, this one was sounding really good, so it's also maple Bubinga with an outer layer of cordia. And as far as cymbals go, I am playing some hi-hats that are actually prototypes. Well, actually, they've been finalized at this point, so they're unreleased, but there'll be a Matt Garstka signature Meinl set of 14-inch hats, so be on the lookout for those. I'll be coming out with some videos featuring those hats as well. And of course, I'm using my signature fat stack. I'm using my signature Equilibrium China, and I'm using this ride. I've just changed it out. It's a Foundry reserve ride that's a 22-inch, and it's just the regular one. I also have a light that I really like, but yeah, I feel the medium has more body. It cuts a little bit more, which is kind of important for this genre of music. I really deal with 18-inch crashes these days. I used to have some 16s, but 18s are my workhorse. So I have a hand-hammered, extra thin Byzance Meinl crash, and then I have a extra thin Jazz crash, it's my favorite crash. It's just really papery, really like paper thin. The attack is immediate. It really gives into the hits so that I'm not worrying about breaking it ever. It's really malleable. So I really love that crash. What else? Oh, extra thin or a thin Jazz splash. It's 10-inch. It kind of has the same effect as the crash, where it's really immediate. It's paper thin, so it's got a nice shimmer to it. Definitely is to me like the ultimate sound of splash. It's a splashy sound. Let's see, heads. I just traded out a 22-inch Power Stroke 4 coated for a 22-inch Power Stroke 4 clear, and I'm really getting a lot of definition out of that. And also the wood beaters, the Iron Cobra wood beaters that I'm using are also contributing to a lot of that attack. I'm using coated Emperors on the toms. I usually go for either a coated Emperor or a vintage A. So coated Emperor is 2 7mm plies put together, so that double ply helps to really last a lot longer, especially on the road. But often in the studio, I'll use either a vintage A or sometimes an ambassador. But the vintage A is really nice for me because it's a 7.5 mil layer and then a 3 mil. So I get the durability, the thickness, the warmth of 2-ply, but it doesn't dampen it so much. So I get a little bit more snap out of it. That's a common thing people say with the single ply heads, is that they get a lot of snap out of them. So vintage A is nice in the studio for that. And as far as the snare goes, I'm either using a coated Emperor, or I'm using a coated Emperor X. And the coated Emperor X has a bit more dampening because it has that dot on the bottom, and it's got a bit more durability because of that as well. But sometimes I like to have a little bit more of that snap and a little bit less of the boxiness. Hardware is, it's hardware. I use either the Tama Road Pro stuff or the Tama Star stuff, and for me, they're pretty synonymous with each other. And that's pretty. Oh, my signature sticks, Vic Firth signature sticks. It's kind of a cross between a 55A and a Buddy Rich, so it's a 16-inch length. It's a .585 thickness, so it's a little bit thicker than a 55A, but it has more taper. So the weight the weight range is about typically the same. It's just there's a little bit more beef at the bottom of the stick, and what that allows me to do is be a little bit more versatile and what I'm able to play. It's a bit more agile. So it's also got a teardrop tip, which is nice for me because I was never a barrel tip guy. I was usually an acorn tip guy. I like that attack for me, and it doesn't dig into my head so much that I got to change my heads all the time. That was my biggest problem with the barrel tips. So for in-ears, I'm not using in-ears. I'm using just like over the ear Vic Firth headphone, the goofy, big, giant headphones, nerdy looking things. I have a pair of JH Audios. They're Roxanne's, and for some reason, there's more bleed. I don't know if and most people are like, how is that possible? It's molded to your ear, it's an in-ear, but I think it's because it's hollow plastic, and the fact that I'm playing an acoustic instrument and it's really loud right in front of me, I think that contributes to getting more bleed from those. Or it could just be the coloring of, having the headphones over my ears. That kind of gives me more of a low-end feedback from my kit, which is mostly what I need because they're feeding me overheads. All the slap, all the high end is coming in through the speakers of the headphones. So, yeah. I also sometimes use Shure 215s, but yeah, mostly it's those nerdy Vic Firth over the ear headphones. It's a first chair throne. I like a flat top. It's round or circular, but the top is flat. Yeah, I don't like hydraulic seats. I don't like that they move when I'm moving because I move a lot on the kit. So it's got to be threaded. I'm using Iron Cobra Roll and Glide for the kick. And like I said, I've got the wood beaters on there, and those give me a bit more cut. Usually I do felts, but I don't know. I've been liking the wood, the attack of the wood lately. And using an Iron Cobra hi-hat pedal. And actually, I've got this connecting piece that actually attaches. I think a lot of people don't know this, that this exists. It's a TPA 90, and what it does is attaches the Iron Cobra double pedal, the slave pedal, to the hi-hat stand. And this kind of keeps you from having to adjust your hi-hat stand mid-set or like after every song, or reposition your bass pedal, because it locks them together. So I never really have to worry about that. And if I want to move the pedal, I move the hi-hat with it. The thing never moves because you've got the two teeth from the hi-hat stand digging in, and you've got two teeth from the slave pedal digging in. So that thing is solid as fuck. I think any metal drummer should know about that.